By learning from the 35 states that came before us, we were able to refine our implementation and learn how to best reach voters in all areas of Nebraska. We had a smooth and successful rollout of voter ID, thanks to the Elections Division of our office and all of our county election officials, to whom Nebraskans owe a debt of gratitude for their work all across the state of Nebraska. CISA has been an important partner in several security measures within the last 2 years, including hardening cybersecurity measures throughout our state. All of Nebraska's 93 counties now have their websites scanned weekly for vulnerabilities. All 93 counties now have a managed service provider or internal IT department to handle day-to-day security protocols. And all 93 counties now have .gov email and website addresses that will help prevent bad actors from using their identities. These are important steps we're taking across Nebraska to ensure that our cyber infrastructure is protected. In addition, we recently coordinated with CISA to bring together election officials, CISA's local emergency personnel, and IT teams to hold emergency scenario exercises. At 5 different locations in Nebraska, county election officials devised responses to hypothetical but very plausible emergency events that could impact election operations. CISA helped facilitate that discussion and offered improvements to further strengthen our incident response plans. Our Elections Division, our county election officials, and everyone on their staffs come to work every day to ensure voting is protected and possible for every eligible Nebraska voter. Holding accurate and reliable elections can seem effortless to voters because we have a high standard for operations. It's extremely rare for voters to encounter issues in Nebraska when they go to cast their ballot. But holding a smooth election doesn't happen by accident. There are months of preparation, and Nebraskans owe a debt of gratitude to our election workers and the thousands of poll workers who will be serving their communities on Election Day. And let me now turn it over to Iowa Secretary of State Paul Pate for his remarks. Paul?
Thank you, Robert. Well, thank you for hosting this opportunity for us to share some best practices and have a good conversation. As a past president of the National Association of Secretaries of State and the dean now, actually, I'm getting a little older and serving, but of our colleagues, I've seen the progress and I've seen the evolution of elections over these last 20-some years, and it is much more aggressive. And as my colleague in Minnesota would always say, for many of us in the cyber world, it's a race without a finish line. We have to continue to work every single day to make sure we're ahead of that process. And we have to take it very seriously. Robert outlined all the things Nebraska is doing. That's become the standard playbook now for all of our jurisdictions in this country. We know we have to do all these things to prepare. In fact, we always say we plan for the worst and hope for the best. And that's what we have to keep operating from. I would like to underscore a couple quick points, and that is we talk about cyber, and that's so crucial. But talking about the physical side of this as well, you know, many of our states have a lot of precincts. We have over 1,600 in Iowa, 99 counties, and we're only as good as our weakest point. So we've got to make sure every piece of that has the resources to be successful. So whether it's doing physical threat assessments on the local level, whether it's dealing with the various cyber protections, the training for the folks who are running the elections, these are also crucial. In fact, I tell my folks in Iowa, you can count on the integrity of our elections because we have things like voter ID, we have paper ballots, we have pre-testing of our tabulators, public pre-testing, we have the post-election audits. And let's underscore the big important thing. I have 10,000 of your friends and neighbors who are working those polls. The people you go to church with, the people you know, people your kids go to school with, they're the ones who are providing that transparency to make sure these elections are run properly. And it's imperative that Americans and Iowans have confidence in those election results, because the day after the election, if they don't believe that that's their governor or their senator or their president, our republic has fallen without a single bullet being fired. That's not acceptable. So we're going to continue to be vigilant and do what we can on our front. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Inside joke, I apologize. I get the pleasure of introducing my good colleague from the South, Jay Ashcroft, the Secretary of State from Missouri. Thanks,
Let me just reiterate some of the things that Paul said. Really appreciate, Bob, you doing this. Appreciate CISA being not just a part of this, being a main component of this. Appreciate the university and all that you do. One of the things that most people take away from disagreements about elections and concerns about elections is they just focus on security. And yes, we need to do that. And it needs to be done at the cyber level. It needs to be done on the physical side. But it also needs to be, how do we increase transparency? How do we invite and cajole and slightly push more Americans to be a part of the process, to come and see, to be poll workers, to be poll challengers, to be poll watchers? Because elections aren't for candidates. Elections really aren't for the government. We run elections for the people of the states. We run elections for our government because it is how we, the people, decide that our republic will move forward. And I just appreciate the opportunity to get together with other individuals in this area, with other secretaries of state, and discuss and brainstorm and sometimes cuss and discuss how we can do things better to make sure that regardless of who wins and who loses, regardless of which issues pass and which issues fail, at the end of the day, the American people can drink their beverage of choice and either celebrate or commiserate, but know that they were a part of the decision, that their votes counted, and that the votes made the difference. So thank you for doing this. And to anyone that watches or hears about this, why aren't you getting involved as a poll worker, a poll watcher, or a poll challenger? The greatest line of defense for our constitutional republic is we the people, and I want to encourage you to be involved. I wanted to just go ahead and announce Paul just for the fun of it, but I actually get to introduce the best-looking Secretary of State that we have with us today. Monet Johnson is the Secretary of State. She's been doing great things. She's a newer Secretary of State. Love the energy that she brings to the role and the new ideas she brings. So please, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. In South Dakota, we have actively prioritized security in the lead up to this election. Communication with other agencies and county officials has been the backbone of our security planning. We are fortunate that so many kind, competent people have stepped up to support their election officials and communities. We'll be able to use their existing relationships and communication chains to ensure information gets where it needs to go. From our end, we've invested time in educating these partners in the finer details of election administration. This has given us a chance to bring attention to lesser-known election events and also to help public safety officials plan appropriately for crowd sizes. We've also found that once the initial contact is made, more agencies are more willing to offer up their own opinions and expertise in support in this election process. Simple conversations have done wonders to elevate the capabilities of all those involved. Cybersecurity serves as a prime example of these collaborations. Through partnerships with other agencies, we've gained insight into the type of cyber threats we may encounter at the county and the state level and how best to mitigate them. We've been able to adjust our planning in a timely manner as the threat environment changes. We've also engaged other agencies' IT teams to exchange best practices and to better understand any shared infrastructure. Our vendors have worked closely with us to review their incident response plans and capabilities. And we've established expectations on information to be shared and in what time frame. Our physical and operational security has benefited in a similar manner. South Dakota public safety agencies have long established relationships with their county and city counterparts. Because of the hard work done by these teams, we've been able to streamline communications about upcoming election events. Public safety offices remain aware of events important to citizens, and election officials gain peace of mind in knowing that they've ensured the safety of themselves and their constituents. The greatest unease we have about the general election is the uncertainty of the time period between polls closing and then results being finalized. We are workshopping scenarios with public safety teams to ensure they know the time and place of post-election events. County officials have been notified of time periods for county canvasses. Our state public official is being engaged to plan for the state canvass and electoral vote in December. Overall, we consider ourselves very lucky. We have active partners ready to provide support wherever needed to protect the election process and the people involved in it. Our informational pieces have been well received and integrated into existing plans, often accompanied by offers to immediately inform us of concerns they encounter by their work. Protecting the voting process and its facilitators is a collaborative process, and we have full faith in our state's ability to overcome any disruptions. And I am proud to be the South Dakota Secretary of State. And it is my honor to introduce Jen Easterly.
Thank you so much, Secretary. Well, thank you so much to Secretary Evnen and his team for hosting us. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here in Omaha, along with our teammates on election security and election administration. So CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, was stood up 6 years ago to protect and defend the cyber and physical infrastructure that Americans rely on every hour of every day, to include the infrastructure that Americans use to cast their ballots and the infrastructure used to ensure that those ballots are in fact counted as cast. Now, in the aftermath of Russian attempts to influence the 2016 presidential election, election infrastructure was designated as critical infrastructure, and CISA was designated as the federal government lead for election infrastructure security. As we know, states run elections. Our job is to bring together the power of the federal government to provide support to state and local election officials who are on the front lines of defending democracy, administering, managing, and securing our elections. In this job, I've had the great privilege to spend time with election officials across this nation, folks like Secretary Evnen, Secretary Ashcroft, Secretary Pate, Secretary Johnson, Secretary Schwab, who's with us this morning. I know how tirelessly they work to ensure that every one of their citizens' votes are counted as cast. It's why I have tremendous confidence in the security and integrity of our elections, and why the American people should as well. All that said, we are facing an incredibly complex threat environment. There are cyber threats like ransomware, physical threats to election officials and polling places, and the very real threat of foreign malign adversaries, Russia, Iran, China, who are intent on undermining American confidence in our democratic institutions and sowing partisan discord. It is a difficult environment, and it's why we at CISA are so proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with election officials across the nation. Since the beginning of this election cycle, we are providing more resources in more jurisdictions than ever before, over 1,000 physical security assessments, over 700 cybersecurity assessments, over 180 tabletop exercises to work through various scenarios, 440 training sessions that have reached tens of thousands of election workers. We are really proud to be able to work with the election officials and to be able to enjoy their trust in taking advantage of our voluntary no-cost services, our information, and our training. At the end of the day, we know that elections will be safe, they will be secure, they will be free, they will be fair, but there will be things that go wrong, and it's important in particular for the media to be aware of that. Power could go out. Somebody will forget a key to a polling place, so it opens late. There could be a ransomware attack on an election office. The good news is these disruptions, while problematic, will not affect how votes are counted and how votes are cast. Moreover, election officials have been preparing for months and months and years to deal with these types of scenarios. They are prepared, they are ready, And again, I have tremendous confidence in our election officials, having seen all of the work that they've done to improve the security and resilience of election infrastructure. In closing, I would echo what Secretary Ashcroft says. If there are people who do not have confidence in the security and the resilience or the integrity of our election processes, please be part of that process. Sign up to be a poll worker. And moreover, if you have questions about the information that you're seeing, the people that you need to go to are your state and local election officials. It is a complicated process, but it is a transparent process. And your state and local election officials, like the Secretaries of State behind me, are the authoritative subject matter experts that can help explain to you how your vote is secured and how your vote is counted as cast. In closing, I want to thank again Secretary Evnen and his team for hosting this, all the other secretaries for being part of this. It was terrific feedback this morning, and it is my great pleasure to introduce the Director of Insight, Dr. Gina Ligon, who very graciously hosted us this morning. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gina Ligon. I'm a professor here at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and I am the director of the National Counterterrorism Innovation, Technology, and Education Center, which is the Department of Homeland Security Center of Excellence for Terrorism Prevention and Counterterrorism Research. So we are the federal designated center of excellence for this kind of academic work that supports keeping our elections safe and keeping us safe from all kinds of non-state or extremist threats to the United States critical infrastructure. We're here in the middle of the country, and so we wanted to convene Secretaries of State, Director Easterly here because we see our role as part of a team sport, collective defense, and making sure that all of us, our students here at the University of Nebraska, the researchers across our consortium with 38 partner universities, are all doing research on not only what threats we have seen in the past, but what are the emerging threats that we haven't seen yet that could materialize? And so this morning I got to share some of that research with the secretaries to talk to them about the active research projects that we have going on at Insight about terrorist use of emerging technology, threats to election workers, American susceptibility to conspiracy theories, and ways to be able to assure the ballot process is counted through risk-limiting audits. We have a wide portfolio, all looking at ways to keep our elections safe, and it's been an honor to host these state and federal partners here, and we had industry partners here last night to learn about how we can all be part of this team sport that is election security. So thank you so much for being here, and I will turn it over to Aaron to be able to manage questions, or Jackie, sorry.
Chris Burbaka, I'm a reporter with the Omaha World-Herald. So I did a story on early voting in person starting Monday, talked to a young guy, among many other voters, who said he seemed a little skeptical of the process, even though he wanted to make sure he voted and didn't get busy and blow it off on election day. And he just said, I want to be sure that now that I put my ballot in, it's going to get counted right and there's not going to be any funny business. What would you say to a guy like that?
This is yours, if you want. It's yours.
That seems to be a Nebraska question. Get involved in the process. Go be a poll worker. Go be an election observer. Find out how you get to do those things, and go watch this process happen and see what you think, and draw your own conclusions about it. We test every ballot counting machine in the state 3 times before every statewide primary and general election when we're testing these machines for accuracy. Post-election, after this election, we will select 10% of our precincts and hand count 3 races. The precincts will be selected randomly, although there will be at least 1 precinct in every county. Some counties in Nebraska have only 1 precinct. For those that have more than 1, they'll be randomly selected. We will announce the precincts after the polls close. We will announce the races that will be counted after the polls close. And then throughout the state, there'll be these 3 races, and those 10% of precincts are going to be hand counted. And they'll be hand counted publicly. That is, there'll be observers. There'll be observers from both parties. And then the hand count will be compared to the machine count. Let's see how that turns out. When we did that in 2022, we across the state hand counted more than 48,000 ballots, and we found discrepancies in 11. That's a discrepancy rate of 23 thousandths of 1%. And what we found was that 5 of those 11 the machine couldn't read them because the voter marked the ballot too lightly. Now, every single ballot that's handed to a voter in the state of Nebraska bears the following instruction: darken the oval completely. And 48,000 of their friends and neighbors were able to follow that instruction, but these 5 people were not. And the question is, why not? What happened there? And the best working theory that I've come up with is that they wanted to vote for this guy, but not very bad. So you have to darken the oval completely. So we're going to do that again. We'll do that after every statewide primary and general election. We'll do it after the general election on November 5th. Those are the ways that your young voter can gain some assurance that these elections are fair, secure, and accurate. Now, there was one other thing that I left out about how we take care of these things. And if I think of it, I'll break into whoever's answering their question. We'll keep going.
All right, I think we have another question.
Hi, I'm Marjorie Beck with the Associated Press. I think I would direct this to Secretary of State Evnen, since I'm in your state. Why did you find it necessary this year to have this type of summit informing people that elections are safe and fair?
Well, why do we have this summit? Why did we say we wanted this summit this year? Well, why not? Election security is not static. Election security is not a one-and-done deal. Election security is dynamic. The challenges to elections are dynamic. And if you're going to continue to address these dynamic challenges to elections, then you do so in a dynamic fashion. It seemed wise and appropriate this year to convene this summit, and I expect we'll be doing this again in the future as well.
I think we have a question in the back.
Hi, I'm John Grinvalds with 1011 News in Lincoln. If a candidate refuses to concede an election, say in 2020, and leaves it up in the air whether he would in this election, does that factor at all into your concerns over election security and integrity?
We're not here to serve candidates. We're here to serve the people of this country. Candidates and issues will run their elections how they want to. We're here to administer elections so that the people of our respected states and jurisdictions can, as Americans, let their voices be heard and know that their voices will make the difference when the election is over. So if you are worried about how a candidate or multiple candidates or whatever act, that's not for us to get involved with. I am not the Secretary of State of Missouri for Republicans. I am not the Secretary of State of Missouri for Democrats. I am not the Secretary of State of Missouri for Libertarians. And the Better Party also got ballot access. I want to add them. I am the Secretary of State of Missouri for all Missourians. And I think that I and my colleagues look at ourselves when we do a good job. We are the basketball ref that nobody notices. We are the linesman in the football game that no one notices. We call it as it is. We provide for the administration of the election, but the decisions are made by the people. And if they like what a candidate does, they can vote for him. If they don't like it, they can vote against him. In my official capacity, that's none of my business. My business is to make sure that you're if you're a legally registered voter in my state, you have accessibility to vote, the security in the election so you can know that your vote will count and not be discounted by illegal occurrences, and that there can be credibility so whether you win or lose, when all is said and done, you can know that what was done appropriately. That's what we focus on. We'll let the candidates speak for themselves.
Can I just add one thing, just from a national level, just to your point on the security of election infrastructure? I do think it's important to note the massive progress that's been made over the past couple years by election officials across the nation, so that the results, once they are official and certified, why Americans can trust them. If you look at the fact that over 97% of registered voters will cast their ballots in jurisdictions where there is a paper record that can be verified by that voter, that can be used to count and recount and ensure accuracy if there is a very close margin of error, that's hugely important. It's important for the American people to know that the machines that they use to cast their ballots are not connected to the internet. So very, very hard for malicious cyber actors to be able to get into those systems, nearly impossible. And then also important to know that election officials have developed multiple defense in depth layers, technological, physical, procedural, to protect that election infrastructure from being messed with or tampered with, including pre-election logic and accuracy testing, enhanced cybersecurity protections, physical access controls, and post-election auditing. So those are the reasons why I have so much confidence that the vote will be accurate once it is certified.
I'm Brian Beach with Nebraska Public Media, and I know a concern some voters have is why it takes so long for these results to come in, or even just at the presidential level that it could take up to a week, knowing that, I guess in India, they counted up 640 million votes in a single day. I guess, can you speak to sort of why this process in the U.S. maybe takes a little bit longer than in some other countries?
We'll take a survey of how long it takes in each state, because you've got several states represented here. Unofficial election results are usually available in the state of Nebraska, across the state in virtually all races, election night. But there are provisional ballots that have to be reconciled for a week, for the week following the election, and then the election is certified shortly after that. So we're doing pretty well, and I can't speak to India. Don't know about the situation in India, but we have our unofficial results on election night. In virtually every election, I anticipate that we'll have that this year as well.
I just want to add, I agree with what Robert just shared with you. Most of us do have on election night the unofficial results, but we are seeing such a polarization in our election process right now. We have many more races now that are so close that until we have a chance to do the checks and balances that you want us to do, we're not in a race to give you the official one. So if it takes us a week, then it's better to give you the accurate number than to jump ahead. And I had a congressional race a few years ago in Iowa that 6 votes determined the winner. So I guarantee you we were counting those a couple times just to make sure we had the right winner when we got done at the end of the day. So we want to make sure that happens. And with human error and things along those lines, we really do have to do those extra checks. So be patient, and I tell the media this, I tell the public this. I said, we want to give you accurate results. It's not a race to get it out at 10 o'clock because the polls close at 8. So we need a little more time. We're going to take it to make sure we get it right. Thank you.
Some other things to keep in mind. In my almost 8 years as Secretary of State, I can't remember a race changing from the unofficial results to the official results after the certification process, unless it was like a 5-vote margin at the time. So I think everyone here, we're getting unofficial results out. You probably know 99% of the races by 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. Which is great, and I thank our poll workers that help us do that. We do have to remember something. There are young men and women across this globe that are defending our freedoms. they don't have great mail service. We have to make sure that their ballots count. So under federal law and state law pursuant to that, there are a handful, generally speaking, sometimes more depending on your jurisdiction, of overseas military voters that have to postmark, have to have that sent before the election. But there are a handful of ballots that we can sometimes get by Friday at noon after the election. And I believe in getting quick results out. My colleagues do. But we all believe in getting it right. And we believe in making sure that every American, no matter where Uncle Sam has sent them, has the right to participate in our elections. But I would just say that with this cross-section of election administrators, unless it's a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 10-vote difference, the results are known the night of the election. And we get those results out.
I would just say in South Dakota, we had one county that needed to hand count all of the ballots. So that took about till 2 a.m. for a primary. We have just under 600,000 voters in South Dakota, so a small amount. So we're looking for a lot more people to participate in the general election, but our election night reporting is pretty darn accurate, but we have on there unofficial results. So we know you guys want the results, and we try to get them out there as soon as we can. Thank you.
Question for Gina. Alex McClune with KETV. I'm wondering if you can talk more about the threats that have been researched here, and can you talk at all about the threats we haven't seen yet that could materialize?
Yeah, so we have 4 projects, and some of them are conducting here at University of Nebraska, Omaha, but as the National Counterterrorism Research Center, we actually have 38 universities across the country who are also doing this work. And so just to highlight a few that we're concerned about, and some of those are threats to election workers themselves. You know, we only have access to federal trends and federal case law around this, and so that's a really high bar. So we think we're actually only seeing the tip of the iceberg when it comes to that increase in the physical violence to election workers, election administrators, particularly in contentious states, swing states that we have been researching. So Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia have seen the largest spikes in our data set. I'm really concerned because we have another project led by University of Arkansas where they're doing interviews, victim experiences with election workers, and a lot of these individuals, particularly women, don't report. They don't report when they have these threats of violence happening to them. And so as much as people say this is nothing new, we've experienced this for a long time, our data just doesn't support that. I think that what's happening is that people either don't know what's a First Amendment protected right and just being angry, and what's a threat of violence, which is actually a federal crime. And so we are really trying to do research to help mitigate that, to protect the protectors is what we call it. We do see election workers as part of our protection and critical infrastructure. And so I'm just really concerned about those threats escalating and making folks feel unsafe doing their job to keep our democracy safe. Thanks.
A follow-up, because
Sure.
you mentioned swing states. We're in the blue dot. Does this fall into that conversation as well?
Yeah, so we are just starting the project in Nebraska. So we've so far only interviewed the states that I mentioned because, again, we're looking at federal charges. We actually don't have federal charges here in Nebraska, so that's a hopeful sign that this is not as contentious of an area. I'd like to think as a Nebraskan that people are very civil here, and I think the more we can keep that kind of discourse and requisite out of the media to be able to keep it as much of about issues as opposed to people, the safer our election workers will be in this state, particularly in the 2nd District. Thanks, Alex.
1011 News, John Grinvalds with 1011 News again. This is a hyper-focused Nebraska question, so sorry to all the other Secretaries of State. But Secretary Bob Ebden, could you answer? We got this question from a viewer. It has to do with the amended cross-claim in a lawsuit. They were asking about election integrity, where in that amended cross-claim, you called into question up to about 100,000 signatures on the ballot measures, Nebraskans for Medical Marijuana, those two ballot measures. One person was asking us, they called in asking, does that mean that these county election commissioners weren't doing their jobs, that they didn't catch all these potentially tainted signatures? If they make those mistakes, what kind of other mistakes could they make? So I'm wondering if you could shed some light on that.
Thank you, John. I believe that the Attorney General in his briefing has indicated that there are up to something like 49,000 signatures that are called into question, but not because the signatures weren't properly matched by our county election officials. Our county election officials across the state did an outstanding job of processing all of the petitions. They qualified, had to review something on the order of 600,000 signatures over the course of a 40-day period of time. And they did an outstanding job, and they were very accurate and complete in what they did. What's called into question here is whether or not they were properly notarized, whether the notaries had the signature collector in front of them when they notarized the petition form, which is a requirement of notarization, or whether the notary had engaged in, whether the signature collector had engaged in some fraudulent acts. These are questions that are raised that don't have anything to do with qualifying the signatures and are not apparent on the face of the petitions themselves. And so we'll let that proceed. Normally I wouldn't comment on litigation, but I thought I would respond to that question just to bring some clarity there.
We have a question for Director Easterly. This is from Dale Denwalt with the Oklahoman. Has CISA noticed specific threats or discussion by terror actors against the 2024 elections?
So at this time, we have not seen specific threats from terrorists to elections. That said, as I think folks know, in Oklahoma yesterday, the FBI disrupted a terrorist plot that was apparently looking to create some sort of a violent attack around large gatherings on Election Day. So that is really the first indication that we've seen the potential for a terrorist threat to elections or around Election Day. Obviously, our intelligence community, our Federal Bureau of Investigation, the federal government is working hard to be able to understand the full range of threats, whether that's a cyber threat, a physical threat, threats of foreign malign influence and disinformation, and certainly threats from terrorist entities. I think it just reinforces what Director Ligon said earlier is, this is an event, a very complicated event where you have tens of thousands of polling places, hundreds of thousands of election workers, probably some 150 million people who are voting, and so there could be a full range of threats. That's why we've been working so closely with state and local election officials, providing those physical security assessments, providing de-escalation training, providing active shooter training to make sure that election officials are prepared for the full range of threats. All that said, I think that disruption that happened yesterday is an isolated case. Of course, if there are other things that we are seeing from the terrorist landscape, we will ensure that election officials are apprised of that immediately.
Another question for you, Director Easterly. This is from Julian Barnes from the New York Times, and we only have 5 minutes left, so this might be the last question. Is there any assessment that Nebraska is at any special risk of foreign influence operations given their district-by-district electoral vote distribution? And for anyone...
So first off, and certainly I can turn it over to Secretary Evnen, but we have not seen specific threats from foreign adversaries, whether that's China, Russia, Iran, to Nebraska, given the situation that you just brought up about the sort of split electoral votes. What I will say, though, is we've seen very clear indication that foreign adversaries remain a persistent threat in aiming to do two things. First of all, to undermine American confidence in our democratic institutions and in the security and integrity of our elections, and second, in sowing partisan discord, which could happen here just given that split electoral vote situation. All that said, we've not seen anything that specifically calls out Nebraska. And to the Secretary's point earlier, we have worked hand in hand with the Secretary, his election director, Wayne Benna, and our team to ensure that they're able to take advantage of all of the no-cost resources that we have. And it's really been a fabulous and exemplary partnership. And I'm very grateful to the Secretary for all of the work that he and his team has done, and for working with us on all of the things that we can provide. I'll turn it over to the Secretaries. I'd just say one last thing. From a national perspective, one of the strengths is, if you've seen one state's election, you've seen one state's election. The beauty is states have different rules across jurisdictions. So in some cases, there may be unofficial election results that don't come out for a couple days. Certainly in some states, it could be very, very close, and that will require counting and recounting and auditing with paper ballots to ensure the accuracy of the vote. So it could be a couple days, and that's why it's so important for the American people to remain patient and for the media to make sure that if there are any questions out there about what's happening on the ground, that you go to those authoritative subject matter experts, that you go to those state and local election officials and ask them what's going on, because they are the ones that know. But in that period between November 5th and frankly, up until January 20th, we have to remember that there are various milestones that require certification and validation. And in that space of uncertainty or ambiguity or challenges, our foreign adversaries are going to create a wedge, attempting to shred our institutions, attempting to sow discord. And that's why it's up to all of us as Americans, as the Secretary said, we the people. These elections are for us. It's up to all of us to do our part in protecting and preserving our democracy.
Did anyone want to close on the second question? Between the post-vote pre-certification time, what are states planning to do to push back against influence operations during that time?
If there are, we'll just tell the truth. I mean, we are all committed to letting as much transparency into our elections to the point of allowing you, we will not allow you to see how an individual voted. But I think our job, if there is a portion of our job to fight disinformation, it is to tell the truth, to put out information, to be transparent, to let people know that if they have questions, we're there. We're not going to talk about candidates. We're going to talk about the process. We're going to talk about the votes. We're going to talk about the certification process. And as always, we will invite the people of this country and of our jurisdictions to come and see and taste and see that the elections are well run.
All right, it is 1:30, so we will conclude with that. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and thank you, secretaries and directors, for being here.